Okay, well, let's begin by welcoming Marilia Marien, our guest teacher today, who's going to sit in dialogue, and we're going to learn about Marilia's work and a little bit about your life. So let's get into it, as the YouTube creators like to just jump right in. Okay. I'd like to try something just slightly different this morning as I continue to experiment with these sessions. Rather than kind of rotely rambling straight through your bio, I'd like to pause after a couple of sentences and just see if you have anything to add. So you are a mindfulness-based instructor and psychotherapist. Combination of those two things. And we will get into that. That's actually something I'm really excited about exploring, the juxtaposition, if that's the right word, of these different aspects of life. But do you have anything just off the top of your head to say about being a mindfulness instructor and psychotherapist?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is perhaps parsing them out that way makes it seem like they're mutually exclusive, but they're not. And I know we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that, but and the choice actually to say mindfulness instructor before psychotherapist, and because that actually reflects a transition and a path, not complete change, but opening up, I suppose, for me, just in the last year or two. So that was a conscious decision actually to put them in that order. So.
Okay, well, that's meaningful.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And you're a certified teacher of both MBSR, and I'm going to say it for anybody listening who doesn't know the acronyms that we're so familiar with, and there are so many of, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, and MBCT, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy. So both of those programs, is there anything to say around those?
Yeah, I'm a lifelong learner. So I think about how I sort of came to that, and whenever I'm sort of learning something new, I always seek out how do I, like teachers or that's how I became a psychologist. So I have a PhD in what's called counseling psychology. So what I wanted to learn was how to be a therapist. And so I asked my supervisor and mentor at the time, I said, Tom, I want to do what you're doing. And so he said, well, so to do that, you need to. And I said, all right. So going to school, learning, sort of intellectually, particularly, is just, I can't help it. That's just sort of my approach. And so part of my path coming into mindfulness teaching, instructing, I suppose, was actually desiring at some point to get formally trained in MBSR. And then there's my psychology side, is learning then about MBCT and like, that's great. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to particularly wed psychotherapy and mindfulness. And so I pursued that route as well. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you have taught these programs both in university settings and also general public programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
Yeah, the MBCT just in the university setting, but MBSR in both, yeah.
Yeah, that's most interesting to me. And I think we know things a lot by comparison, and we have a lot of this and that within these three aspects of your bio. So I do want to come back. This really is what I would like to take a look at. After we begin at the beginning with what I've come to call your origin story. What brought you into this work? And I would like to invite you to go back as far back into your life as you choose.
So I would say that probably, at least from being maybe like a young teenager, I was interested in meditation. I wouldn't have called it mindfulness. I didn't think I even used that word or knew what that was. And I was interested probably for like mystical reasons, but also like some sense of, well, I guess now I would say seeking some sense of equanimity and calm and so on. And so I learned a little bit here, a little bit there, but it really wasn't probably until around the time I was in grad school, I started more purposefully trying to learn meditation, read up on it. And towards the end, so in my training, you have to do an internship before you graduate. And so around the time of my internship and then ending my internship, I really got into trying to learn more about it and actually practice a little bit more formally. I was reading books and listening to like CDs and stuff like that, Pema Chodron and different Thich Nhat Hanh. So that actually was a little more my entree into mindfulness, was more my own personal practice and my own interest. And then I was sort of going along, and then as I came into, got my first job and started working full time and so on, I started becoming more curious about how I found mindfulness helpful for me in all the ways you can imagine, I suppose, managing stress, managing life. The older you get, it seems the life more complicated life gets and that sort of thing. And so I found it helpful for me in terms of, again, I think sort of developing some sense of, I can't help but use psychological words, but like distress tolerance and a sense of community, though, and so on. And I thought, over time, I thought, this could probably help clients too, And so I realized, I started learning there's actually more research, and mindfulness started to become more integrated into psychotherapy. And there is more literature on it and so on. So there is a form of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And the core underpinning of that is mindfulness training. People start with mindfulness training, and then they learn these other skills, which may make it easier to learn skills and apply them, by using your mindfulness. And so I had been trained in DBT, and I sought a little further training because I thought, wow, this is it. This is the way to integrate mindfulness and psychotherapy. And then, so I was working in a university counseling center. I wanted to establish some DBT groups. It's a individual and a group intervention modality. And over time, what stuck really was the mindfulness skills module. And that really kind of was my love. So I developed a mindfulness skills group and did workshops and started training my colleagues on how to teach and to run those groups. And then I learned more about MBSR. I had a partner in crime, as it were, in good, talking about origin stories is like a Marvel comic, so it's always for the good, the benefit of all beings, right? And we did this together, actually. So we got trained in MBSR, and then we did the certification path together. And then the same thing with CBT. We both really wanted to learn it. And so that's kind of how I got there.
Yeah, thank you. So if I could go way back to that beginning and the mystical aspects of it, having gone through this path, and I don't think there's anything wrong with using psychological words because, we bring who we are into the room, and you're a psychotherapist, and it all kind of becomes part of the mix. Where do you see that mystical side at this point?
So mystical, you might say also perhaps that's so a sense of spiritual, and spiritual to me, how I see it coming in is actually this sense of a sense that you're connected to something greater than you. Which is why sort of Simona says, she talks about nature and connecting with nature and how it, I can tell you the biology about that, but I think there's also the greater spirituality or some people don't want to use that word. So, but that's where I think it comes in, a sense of you're connected to something greater than you, and you're interconnected. It's interbeing, and that's we are all familiar with from the mindfulness side in particular. So I would say that kind of off the top of my head, that's where it comes in.
Yeah. So now with the mindfulness piece in your bio coming before the psychotherapy piece, do you feel like you are reconnecting to the original root of what you stated brought you into this in some way through this interconnection that's, what I consider the basic truth of things? Yeah.
Yeah. So as a psychotherapist, I've been really trained to sort of try to, and I'm actually changing this in my own way, but I've been really trained to try to keep myself out of things as much as possible. But that's not possible. I mean, that's just simply not real. And so the reconnecting, I think, with the sort of original inspiration comes partly from I have my own personal practice. I have a meditation community that I'm a part of, and I teach in and study with and practice with and so on. So that it actually is very nourishing in that way, and so that's one way actually I stay connected more from that maybe original sort of spiritual root. But the more I practice over the years on my own, and the more I also teach others mindfulness through MBSR or MBCT, the more I connect with that original sense of again, you could say spirituality and mysticalness, but the sense of where we have this commonality. The content of people's stories are different, but the sense of, and I think that's what I connect to, particularly as a younger sort of teenage person, the sense of we are all suffering. We are all experience suffering. We have different causes and conditions that create that suffering, and based on our experience in life and our biology and stuff like that, we may even react to it differently, but that is the commonality among us. And that, to me, that's invigorating to me. So again, as a younger teenager, I couldn't have articulated this at all, but I had some sense of that feeling. It was more of a felt sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's very well articulated now and understood in a way that maybe you didn't quite put it together then. And it is the first noble truth. We're all suffering. And particularly with DBT, so I'm not a psychotherapist, but my understanding is that DBT deals with some very deep suffering that people are going through. So are you seeing DBT, are patients now or clients in your psychotherapy practice? Or
So no, I don't. So I don't have a DBT practice, but I definitely apply the skills and that I've learned through DBT, in my work. So what it seems is that everybody can benefit from DBT. So it really was developed actually for people who experience like a lot of suicidality, a lot of emotional dysregulation, and so on. So on the very serious side of the spectrum of people's suffering and problems. And the reality is that we can all benefit from learning emotion regulation. All of us, everybody on this call can, and we can all benefit from, improving our skills of our interpersonal effectiveness, that sort of thing. So it's very applicable to a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you. So looking at these two sides of things in the way I'm about to propose, how do you see, and you're actually talking about it now, but how do you see the difference between addressing a psychotherapy client in a mindfulness way versus being a mindfulness facilitator, teacher in an MBSR or MBCT classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, as I was training in MBSR, part of the adjustment was trying to do less of the psychologist, question and uncovering and, exploration and rather the mindfulness attitude of letting it unfold, that sort of thing. So maybe a way to approach this is to answer that is to think about, so what do you do as a psychotherapist, which may, and then I would invite actually everybody who is a mindfulness teacher to think about how does that similar or different from how you teach mindfulness, and that might help come up, explain the difference of those. So when a client, a person comes to me for psychotherapy, or any therapist, oftentimes they're experiencing some kind of problem. So psychotherapy might help a person improve symptoms, and it could be depression, it could be anxiety. So there might be something going on in terms of symptomology that you might want to sort of address, or to try to fix, to change or cure or something like that. People come to talk with the psychotherapist to seek maybe some solutions, or to work through some other kinds of problems in their life. It could be with relationships, it could be family dynamics, it could be career dissatisfaction or change or exploration or something like that. Or they may be trying to find some ways to modify how they're thinking about something, or behaviors or something like that. That they've come to some awareness, it's not working for me anymore. Maybe it's causing me more pain. It's affecting the quality of my life and that sort of thing. And so a psychologist or a psychotherapist would help with attending to these kinds of issues. And so you would start, and this is how I start anyway, with trying to do a little bit more of an assessment, so what, is bringing you in. So the way I think about it is I'm looking at the biopsychosocial, experience, background of this person. So what's going on? What are the symptoms of it? Are you feeling more depressed or more anxious or more sad or those kinds of things, more tearful? So I also want to get a little bit of a history. So I'm putting this person into context. I'm learning not only what's going on now, but I'm learning, so tell me a little bit about your past, because our past informs our present. And so I'm getting that to get a bigger sort of holistic picture of this person, to get a sense of what actually is going on. So you might, at the end of that, say, okay, this is what I think is going on. And usually what I think is going on is what they think is going on. It's just a good thing. And so it might be that, so you know what, what you're describing is something called major depression. And this is why, and so based on that, what I suggest is blah, 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 and give a plan of action and so on. And then we sort of work together to decide So how do you want to actually proceed? Oftentimes there's no actual specific necessarily diagnosable thing in terms of what the insurance company would want to see on a form, maybe, but what it is a normal grief reaction. It is, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's pretty darn stressful, it's not pathological. What you're experiencing is actually a reaction to stress and so on. And so we would work together to then sort of address these problems. We would say we have some treatment goals and so on, and we try to work towards them, and we agree how long we might work and so on. So mindfulness might be something that we employ together to work on their concerns. Sort of similar, so the DBT is a good analogy for that. So it's an aspect of it. And learning mindfulness and practicing mindfulness may feel therapeutic, but it's not treatment from the point of view of psychotherapy. And so we might learn mindfulness. So for example, I teach clients, and more they're asking me, I've heard about mindfulness. I've heard about meditation. Can you teach me that? Sure. You don't have to ask me twice, that one. So we might learn that, but then they use that, whatever the benefits of learning mindfulness, increasing their metacognitive abilities, increasing their ability to see thoughts, as mental formations, not necessarily as truth, reality. And then we apply that to the other things we're learning, to manage anxiety or to deal with the difficult, whatever, family member or boss or the anxiety about changing jobs or something like that. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you, Marilia. I'd like to look at the other side, though, because this is often what I see in MBSR mentorship when psychotherapists become mindfulness teachers in that other direction. Has it been challenging taking off the psychotherapist hat as the MBSR teacher or MBCT teacher in that classroom setting?
So it's been a journey, because I think, so I've also was trained in group psychotherapy, and in group psychotherapy, you are being more active and helping people uncover and perhaps, So I've been trained, in a certain way, and now MBSR and MBCT are asking me to do things a little certain. So oftentimes it's actually holding back on doing some of the things that I would normally do, like, oh my gosh, it was so hard for me not to ask, well, where do you think that came from? Like, when did you first experience that? I just, nope, anybody else, similar or different experience? So it was actually a training in refraining, actually, and that's why I'm mindfulness practice, yeah. And then, but I'm always a psychotherapist, and I actually literally always have the ethical and legal responsibility as a psychologist. So there are times when it has been clear that somebody in a class, in an MBSR class, is struggling, and it's actually, most of the time somebody will come up to me and say, I'm really struggling. And so I might refer them and say, well, you might consider talking with somebody about that. And then, follow up with them and refer them. And I feel much more comfortable doing that because that's been a lot of my job, professionally. So that's part of the difference too, is that, so I have to, and I am very clear about, we're learning mindfulness when it's just MBSR that I'm teaching or some other, or mindfulness. Somebody might come individually for me, for example, to learn mindfulness. And that it's not psychotherapy. And then I'll talk about the differences and encourage them if they don't already have one to talk with a therapist that might be a good fit. What also happens, though, interestingly, which is kind of fun for me, and I started doing this. I was working in a university counseling center. Is that as the staff became more interested and more versed with mindfulness, so a client would be in therapy and talk therapy with them to deal with anxiety, whatever it is. And they would say, Marilia, could you meet with my client for a few sessions and teach them mindfulness so they can apply it and integrate it into psychotherapy? So again, yes, absolutely. So I would do that, and so that actually, again, I'm not trying to be a therapist. I'm not their therapist. But my awareness of how therapy works and how you can integrate it into psychotherapy is helpful. So I actually consult with the referring therapist and teach the client. But it is about being very clear about, and in my head, very consciously clear about, all right, now this is the role that I'm inhabiting. I'm doing this. I'm teaching an MBSR classes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you. That sounds skillful. And in that university setting, were you primarily counseling students one-on-one, or were you students or staff, or did you have group programs in MBCT?
I was primarily doing individual therapy for graduate and undergraduate students, and we didn't work with faculty and staff, and I was running an MBCT and MBSR groups.
Yeah, so let's look at that comparison between that and a program for the general public that would include older adults. What did you find? What was it like teaching college students?
So, when we started out, there were more graduate students than undergraduate students that would come to our groups. We started in 2014. Yeah. Which makes sense too, that there some of the older students would be more interested in trying this out. Maybe they've already heard about it. They're also maybe more at a time in their life. They're like, okay, I've got to do something different. Something's not working as well for me. And then over the years, we then got more even numbers, graduate, undergraduate. And then one year we had a first-year undergraduate student in our class. And I think this, by the way, is just the change also societally, I think in a positive way, that people will come in and they say, oh yeah, I already learned a little bit of mindfulness in high school, or maybe a parent or some, a favorite uncle or aunt sort of taught them. So the difference for me is that we wanted to do this and run the MBSR and NBCT with fidelity to how it was, the manual, as it were, 2.5 hours, and the practice at home and so on. And we did that. And we also learned that we had to make some adjustments, because the reality is that even for the general public, this is probably the case, but particularly for college, university students, they're too busy. They were trying to fit MBSR and MBCT into their already busy schedules, and so they didn't always prioritize it. Understandably, and whether it was busy schedules because, they're hardworking students or something like that, or there was a great party the night before and you couldn't not go. There's it also has to do with the sort of the age group, and so we really had to work with, which was I think important, particularly for this group of students in this age group, work with as best you can. Being in choice, making decisions, what is skillful and what can you realistically do? And so that's how we approached it. And I think over time we got more and more in that direction. And so encouraging people. So, you would hope, you would perhaps want, although, anyway, it's about to go on a tangent. You would hope and perhaps want people to do 45 minutes, but we know you don't have to do 45 minutes even to get some benefit. So we were like, can you do 15? Can you do 20? And so so over time we actually made the adjustment as well, because we were learning and growing, I think, as instructors. But also you have to meet the needs of the population and where they are developmentally as well. So not just the realities of their lives, which is they were very busy people and trying to do it all, but it's what's realistic in terms of, developmentally speaking for them. So.
Well, I'll use your word, fidelity. It sounds like you were able to do that, and you feel that you were able to keep the fidelity in the program. Yeah, okay. Yeah, happy to hear that. Yeah. Okay, so here's the one that's really interesting to me, because we often see MBSR and MSC, mindful self-compassion teachers, people who teach or get certified in both programs, but it's not often that I get to sit with an MBSR and MBCT instructor. There are many of them out there, but these days we're more often seeing MBSR and MSC paired up, because you have to be a clinician to teach MBCT, so it's not as available. So I'm really happy to be able to ask you, how do you view the difference between the two programs?
I'll give you my felt sense first. That's the first thing that came to my mind as you were asking me that, which is that I felt more comfortable in some ways starting out when I was learning MBCT and then doing my first couple of NBCT groups than I did with MBSR. And I think it's because there's so many things in MBCT that I'm already familiar with. I'd already been doing for 15 years, at least by that time, 18 years, whatever it was, which was, I can explain. I can tell you what the diagnosis of major depression is. I already know how to help you identify what your thoughts are, and you do that walking down the road exercise. That's from CBT, and I'm like, so that was very familiar to me. And I'm so used to inhabiting that role of being the professional and of being the psychotherapist that I think that came more naturally to me, honestly. And personally, I think I did it in the right order as well, which was by the time I started learning MBCT, I'd already had a lot more experience with MBSR. So I wasn't learning how to do body scan and, sitting practice and walking practice. I'd already done that a lot from the MBSR training. And you're doing a lot less of it, actually, relatively speaking, with MBSR. With MBCT. So the difference for me, that was like a felt difference. I can feel that in my confidence. Just from learning the concepts, I was, as you learn anything new, it's a new dance, so you feel a little, not so graceful, and I'm like, okay, here are my notes. I got to make sure I'm saying doing the right thing. What's next on, so that felt that was a learning, curve for me. But the difference is that I can see how MBCT also is therapy. So that's the side that it's not just noticing thoughts as thoughts. Then you're teaching, because in MBCT you're coming up with a plan. It's about relapse prevention. I understand clinically what relapse looks like. I understand what depression looks like, and I also understand what relapse looks like. I understand the things that can lead to relapse. And so there's that educational and practical component that's happening, So for me, that's what stands out as the differences.
Yeah, it's specific to prevention of relapse once somebody's recovered from depression. Because you mentioned it, the walking down the road exercise, is that where you wave at somebody you know?
Yeah, and they don't respond to you. Yeah, and then the question is, what might have occurred. Yeah. Yeah, what came up for you as you heard that story? Yeah. Uh-huh.
And for those who might be watching who don't know it, what are some of the responses you get? And what is the teaching point?
The teaching point is that we project. Often we're projecting. We don't know what the truth is with the capital T, and we're projecting our inferences. It's all an inference. So, and that makes us feel different ways depending on what our explanation for the person's, not waving back. So somebody might be, oh, I felt embarrassed. I got angry. And then, it's always this ranging class. I just love that stuff. This is so other people are like, I thought maybe they weren't wearing their glasses. Or maybe they weren't, I thought they were looking at me, but you know how people look at you, but they're really looking behind you. And so there's this range of responses, and based on their explanation of why they didn't wave back at you, you feel a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've used that exercise in class too, in MBSR as part of the perception piece. So that leads me to ask you, do you see a blending that takes place as you teach MBSR, where MBCT might come in, or anything blended from MBSR into the MBCT classes?
Well, absolutely MBSR and NBCT, because MBCT came from MBSR. Yeah, I think like you taking that walking down the road exercise and bringing it into MBSR. I think when I started learning MBCT, I started bringing some of those things into MBSR because I thought, oh, that's a really nice way to demonstrate that. So sometimes it is sort of taking that one into the other. There's that part in MBSR where we're talking about the causes of stress. We're doing the stress response, and then there's stress reaction cycle and so on. That goes back and forth between MBSR and NBCT for me, for sure. Yeah.
You mean when we look at internal and external stressors?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and stress reactivity and responding versus reacting. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So where do you see all this going now? This combination of mindfulness and psychotherapy and the way that it's evolved for you?
For me personally?
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. So I changed. I left the university counseling center that I was working in, and I've opened my own private practice. Something I thought I would never do. So you never say never, and it's just been such a cool, though, and so rewarding for me experience. So where it's going is, this is my dream. I'm starting to, I had started thinking about this, but able to apply it, which is to have a psychotherapy practice and to keep doing that, because I really enjoy doing psychotherapy. And to have a sort of a mindfulness teaching or training side to my practice, my work, which isn't psychotherapy. So I've run MBSR groups. I'm going to keep doing that, and so as I was working as a therapist in the counseling center, I also I told you I started doing things like training other people's clients in mindfulness and so on. So I actually want to do that. I want to parse that out and offer that for other psychotherapists here, well, it could be anywhere really now at this point, because I'm doing it all online because of the pandemic. So teaching that out, parsing that out, but also particularly offering mindfulness training and MBSR to therapists and allied healthcare providers. So I want to be able to do that, because Personally, I know the stress of having a lot of clients and having a lot of responsibility and going from one thing to the other, that sort of thing. And so there are people, I think health, and particularly healthcare providers, mental health care providers, allied health care providers are pretty stressed before the pandemic, but I think it's just been, now it's on steroids. So I actually want to be able to bring this to that group of folks to help train them, and hopefully they can get the benefits for them personally so that they can live their own personally life with greater ease and so on, but also be able to do their work without getting so burnt out. I think for me, that's what this has also helped to do, having gotten to that point at different times. But for me personally, it's been helpful with that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And have you joined Ni Cheng Liang's Mindful Healthcare Collective?
No, I haven't. And I will. I saw when I saw her video, earlier. So I'm going to. I did get on one of their get in on one of their little webinars and so on, and so definitely, yeah, it's inspiring. That's exactly what's needed.
Yeah, I think that's the direction that you're looking to specialize in a little bit. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Any thoughts on the field itself, the direction that we're headed in with what we're up to with mindfulness?
Mindfulness? Just that I think it's really and actually being a part of this mentor group has been really sort of reinforcing for this, that it's inspiring and pretty cool actually to see how everybody is weaving it into their particular skill set or interests or communities actually. And so that's actually pretty neat. And what's lovely is, I mean, this is particularly this group is a bunch of very well trained and experienced, mindfulness teachers, and then they're bringing it to these specific, populations, and that's cool because that's to me that's the democratization, that is the generalization of mindfulness in a very healthy way, and a way to get it to more people, but people who get them. So yeah, so that's really kind of neat to see actually.
Yeah. Speaking of the group that's here with us, let's take a moment and check in and see if anybody has any questions for Marilia. Anything from around what we've just touched on. We've heard about mindfulness and psychotherapy, teaching to college-age students, allied. Okay, yeah, Linda.
I was just finding raising hand. So I'm curious about how you would describe this similarity or difference between the process of inquiry during MBSR classes, or the difference between that and how we ask questions, I guess, how we explore in psychotherapy. Like, do you see similarities and differences that are interesting?
Yeah, and partly it depends on how you're trained as a psychotherapist as well. So some people are more cognitive behavioral, some people are more psychodynamic, which is more exploration of the past and so on, among other things, really attending to the relationship in psychotherapy. But this is one of the things I had to really work on actually in my training around MBSR. So an inquiry is attending to, it's about what's going on now or just in the immediate, this practice, not how you felt similarly 10 years ago, or we're trying to help them through this practice of inquiry stay in the present moment. It's another practice. To me, it's a mindfulness practice. In psychotherapy, again, the more how I was trained, is we might say, oh, is that similar to how you may have felt in the past? We might lead them actually into that because we're trying to develop insight and awareness. And that's one very specific way to do it, actually, is to help them make connections. You might think there's a connection. Sometimes I ask that question, I have no idea. Usually it's very open-ended. I'm like, I'm not sure, but I know it'd be beneficial if they can have if there is a connection with something that's gone on in the past. And with that insight, then sometimes comes change. And again, you discuss it, and then you work with that insight and that awareness, and you might go deeper and deeper and deeper in that. And with inquiry, it's a different kind of process. Again, we're trying to keep them more into, so what did you notice? That's very open-ended kind of thing. And because it's a group intervention, and this is a big difference, we are trying to get commonality. Group therapy is similar to that, actually, but we're trying to get commonality in the group too. We're having curiosity and how about others, because there's so much healing, and I shouldn't say, well, can be a lot of healing actually, but there's a lot of insight development and so on, and there's something about the power of the group that also I think is what makes MBSR as successful and helpful as it is. So that's also, of course, a big difference when I'm doing individual therapy. But that's a similarity if you're doing a process therapy group. You are working with commonality, because that's the power of groups. It's the power of group therapy. For a lot of folks, what they find helpful healing is just hearing other people's stories and feeling validated in their own.
Thank you. I noticed that in psychotherapy, there's more emphasis now on how you're feeling in your body, like emotions, where they show up and what that reveals. So I think that was one commonality, and now I hear some others that you brought up. So thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I think because of the history of Western psychology, we're mostly interested from here on up. It was all very much in the head. Personally, and I think what research is starting to bear out is that when we need to integrate the whole, particularly related to, it's more in the trauma research, I think, that there's talking about the integration of, the experience of the body as well. That is a very positive direction, I think, for psychotherapy.
Yeah, and I was just going to say one more thing. Also, the emphasis in my training seemed to be like on fixing, on finding solutions. And then as I had more education, there was more solution-oriented therapy, where the idea was you have the answers within. And in a way, that's the similarities sometimes that I think about with MBSR. That's the assumption that everyone's whole. And, we're just using this group as a vehicle to help reinforce and make that seem real, make that not seem real, make that real. So it was an interesting.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because to me, I think that's also one of the beneficial evolutions of psychotherapy is integrating, again, a more of a health approach, like a healthiness approach. So historically, it's looking at pathology. Again, this is the roots of Western psychology and coming out from psychiatry as well. And but I would say, and this is how I approach my own work as a psychotherapist, but definitely in mindfulness-based training and practice, is there's a basic assumption of wholeness and health. But what's happened is, one way to approach it, to understand it, is that that has been covered over, layer upon layer of whatever you want to say, for different reasons, our life experiences and so on. And so we've learned to be not compassionate to ourselves. We've learned to maybe think of ourselves as basically broken and unhealthy. And so what mindfulness can help us do is to begin to peel away those layers that are unhelpful, to get to that core, which is that we are basically whole, complete beings.
Well, thank you for exploring that deeper.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Linda. Let's go to Gabe.
So you have just navigated this intersection of putting mindfulness instructor and psychotherapist, which one comes first, how to navigate that. I'm wondering, is the way in which you put yourself forward, or because we can say advertise yourself, because we all have to do that as therapists, is the way that you do that deliberate? And also, is there a certain type of client that you then attract?
So yeah, it's deliberate, yes. To answer the first part of your question, because I think I've learned over time that I'm better suited to help certain people. Your fit, actually, in therapy is a big part of your experience in therapy. And so not only the therapist has to feel like they can help the client, but the client has to feel like that person can help me too. So I have a range of folks. I have a bunch of folks that I work with. They're completely not interested in mindfulness at all. Maybe some haven't heard of it, or they're just not interested in that, and that's fine. Even though in my sort of bio, I explain that that's part of what I integrate into the work that I do, and so on. But they're not interested in that, so they're attracted to working with me for some other different kinds of reasons. But I have learned over the years, I just have a better sense of who I am. I have a better sense of what I feel I can work with, that I can help people, certainly maybe presenting problems or just kind of personality types and so on. It's just like how you might meet 5 different people, and for a couple of them you're like, wow, I really resonate with that person, And then for other people, it's not like they're bad or anything like that. They don't resonate with you, and you don't resonate with them, and you're not interested, and you're not really making that connection. So I feel over the years I've become better able to kind of suss that out, and to try and put that a little bit more into words. So I'm more congruent externally with how I feel internally. And then I think that helps people make more informed choices in choosing to work together. I also literally will do like a brief phone call with folks, and we want to see, will it be a good fit, So that part of advertising, putting yourself out there that way, is deliberate and thoughtful, because it's important for me, because I also feel it's important to a client or anybody who wants to work with me, that it feels like it's a good fit. And what was the second half of your question?
Since it's deliberate, I'm wondering if there's a certain type of client that you hope to attract at this intersection of mindfulness and therapy.
Yes, and I think from the point of view of openness and curiosity. It's neat and cool when somebody says, "Oh, that's it. I want to work with somebody who knows mindfulness, can integrate mindfulness into the work, and so on." So that's a kind of person. Yes, it would be great to attract that. And then other people, but it's more of like I might say it's more of like a trait or something like that, where somebody is actually just, though willing, is curious and open, ready for change. And in the research, when change happens, it happens because people are in a place that they're sort of ready to make some change. Sometimes in therapy, you work on getting to that place. That's fine too. But so folks who are open and curious and sometimes adventurous, I suppose, and willing to try different things, and to be open and honest and really kind of work with the relationship. So that's yeah. I'm hoping to attract folks like that because I work well that way. Every psychotherapist, even mindfulness teacher, is not, has their own kind of person they work or it's a range of people that they work better with, so it's about finding a good fit, and I suppose that's part of it for me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, we'll take one more from Simona. Simona.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilia. This is so just wonderful. It got me, I guess, thinking, which is like so many different, I'm trying to put together a lot of different ideas or questions that went off as you were talking. And I think it's all around like the intersection of mindfulness and psychotherapy and just mental health in general for the future as a collective. So let's see how I can best express what I'm trying to ask, or maybe just get your view on, because I think this is just such a fascinating topic. So as a collective, and so when you specifically mentioned the idea of talking to people, like from the psychotherapist standpoint, when you're trying to identify whether what they're experiencing is maybe a result of like collective grief, for example, COVID, and everyone is under some sort of stress, and it's because this is a collective thing, versus pathological. So I actually Googled the term pathological to see what exactly does Google say about it. And it said, as a result of a cause of a physical or mental disease. And so then I'm thinking, well, if we zoom out and if we get into the interbeing idea of MBSR or, mindfulness and I love that you and Linda were talking about how MBSR sees us as the whole being, as we are whole, we don't need to be fixed. If we can zoom out enough as a collective to see that any cause of mental or physical disease is at the level of perception, which is based on external and internal environments, but at the same time, it's all one because it's all one feedback loop. How can we bridge that for the future? And do you maybe see mindfulness being more prevalent in the future, to where if kids could learn this in school, that if we learn to have enough compassion for ourselves as we are enough compassion for our past, that maybe we won't even need the psychotherapy aspect of it? Or will it always be that we're all at different, I hesitate to say stages or levels, but we all have different needs and we'll always need some level of both? So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's what came to mind.
I love that big picture view. There's some serious, connection with interconnectedness and so on. I try and parse that out. You're talking, in many ways, you're asking a very metaphysical question. So I think I guess perhaps I I want that to be the case. I want that to be I want us all to get to the point as a planet, as an organism called human beings, where we're not constantly hurting and harming people and so on. But if I need to zoom down a little more close, looking, and we think about a lot of the suffering and pain that is caused. We get back to that core principle. What are the causes of suffering? It has a lot to do with our inner life. And personally, I am not. This is how Marilia kind of sees it. I think it has a lot to do with our inner lives and how we see the world, and then how we react to that. Whether we sense a danger, or there's actual danger, that kind of thing. And I think, so mindfulness isn't for everybody, and that's actually an important part of applying mindfulness, particularly in psychotherapy. There are times when it's contraindicated. You don't want to do that. Now, there are different kinds of mindfulness practices, but there are times like you don't want to do a mindfulness practice that's going to sort of disconnect people from groundedness, and there are times you want to employ techniques that actually help to ground. But there are just times you don't want to apply mindfulness. So the hesitation I think that's coming through is I don't see mindfulness as a panacea. But what I think, if I can operationalize it, what would be helpful for people is to learn the skill, and they may do it through mindfulness or something else, of self-reflection and sort of self-questioning. And by which I mean, why do I believe these things that I do? So, that definition of pathology definitely comes from also a very medical model way of seeing a disease model. Yeah. And the way I think about pathology is also, is what is going on, is what I'm doing, thinking, experiencing, it's kind of harmful for me in my life in some way, and then maybe it becomes more. You might say it's maybe more of a pathology. I'm kind of skittish about that word. But at the core, I think the skill of so let's for example, let's say. To me, racism, the form of racism that we have in our country, I can't speak to other countries, has a lot to do with how we are taught. I think it's literally true that we're not born racist, but we are all socialized. So can't just look at ourselves as these biological beings. That's a part of it, but we're in these social contexts. And so our social identities and how they are differently privileged and oppressed and differently defined and so on begin to act on our our experiences of life, and they begin to teach us so-called truths. I think it's T it's a T, not a cap. It's a small T. It's not a capital T, about the world. Americans are better than anybody else, whatever, I'm from New York City. The Mets are better than the Yankees. That's a sort of innocuous, perhaps, hopefully innocuous example. But you tend to learn that. And then you start, so then you say, oh, that's the truth. That's the truth of the world. I'm better because I'm light-skinned, for example, or I have more money, or whatever it is that you're taught. And that the pathology comes in is because now I have set my self-esteem is conditioned on setting other people below me. I wouldn't say that's something we were biologically born with, but these causes and conditions have created this situation. And so mindfulness can help with this, but again, there might be other ways that people come to this awareness, actually life experience, seeing things happen, and to recognize, wait a minute, I might have the insight, I felt better than that person because, fill in the blank. I'm more educated than that person or something like that. And that made that other person feel so on. So the way I'm thinking about the world affects how I treat other people. It affects how I treat me. And then I'm going to do everything in my power not to feel terrible. So then, consciously or unconsciously, maybe I actually start to put down other people or to agree with behaviors in person or more globally that reinforce that truth for me. Yeah, I'm going to support this law, or I'm going to support that restriction or something like that. So I think it's less about perhaps getting everybody to mindfulness, but helping everybody get to the aware of interbeing and interdependence. That how I act actually affects how you feel, and there's this constant feedback loop. I have no idea if that answered your question, but that's what came up.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. Especially, the last part, really, that's what it comes down to, I feel like. So thank you.
Thank you, Simona, for the question. And thank you, Marilia. That was a beautiful answer from my perspective. I'm glad you didn't compare the Yankees and the Red Sox, or I might have had an issue. But the Mets and the Yankees are okay with me. Beautiful answer. And thank you so much for today and your wisdom and your thoughts. If we inspire one person from this, then our work is done. And hopefully many will be inspired. So, thank you. Much gratitude for you. And we'll stay around on Zoom. There's some more questions. And I just want to thank everybody on Zoom. I want to thank Mark Foreman from Sink to the Mountain Studio, and Mike St. John, who's holding the fort down on Zoom. And hope to see you for another session. If you like today's session, hit the like button on the way out. And if you'd like to support the community, there's a place underneath the video and the text for a donation, which is much appreciated. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again for our next Views from the Field.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Facebook group, where you're also invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio so you don't miss out on future recordings of live sessions.